7 years into my marriage to Alexander Whitmore, the golden boy of New York's elite, his precious little songbird finally flew the coop. And to chase after her, he climbed into his Rolls-Royce, dragging our 6-year-old son Ben along for the ride, staging a public father and son spectacle of love at the airport. The girl had the face of a fragile, helpless flower, but the gleam in her eyes told a different story. She was gloating. What could I do? My husband and my son wanted only her, not me. Twice I considered walking away just to see if they would abandon a major client to run after me. Thank you, darling girl, for handing me back the love you fought for so desperately, only for it to land in my lap. The satisfaction was almost intoxicating. How absurd that anyone would think she and that easily swayed child were worth my dignity in this rotting marriage of convenience. It was the 7th year of my union with Alexander, and I was preparing for a critical investment project. My head swirled with figures, and I had been so consumed with work, I hadn't set foot in our Malibu estate for 3 days and nights. My assistant Samantha Turner pushed open the door, her expression betraying a flicker of unease. She had been with me long enough that it took a lot to rattle her. I sipped my Kona coffee, savoring the rich aroma filling my mouth. Tell me, I said, what stunt have that father and son pulled now to get the New York press frothing? Sam straightened quickly, regaining her professional composure. Mrs. Hale, Mr. Whitmore just drove young Ben to LAX, hitting nearly 125 miles an hour on the freeway. They cornered Ms. Chloe Monroe right at the security gate. There was footage. Alexander, in a black bespoke suit, yanked off his limited edition tie and pressed the delicate girl against the car with a force that left no room for misunderstanding. My son eagerly grabbed her luggage, wagging along behind her like an overeager puppy. The media had their headlines ready. 20-car pileup on JFK Parkway, Whitmore Heir and son block songbird at the airport. In their words, I was reduced to a jealous wife and emeralds glaring green-eyed just the day before. Sam carefully produced an ornate silk box. Inside lay a deep green emerald necklace. Mrs. Hale, will you still wear this to tonight's gala? I closed my eyes, swallowing the ache in my chest. This was the heirloom my grandmother had lost, which I had just reclaimed from a Sotheby's auction. Wear it, I said without hesitation. At the gala, glasses clinked constantly as guests offered greetings. Where there are people, there is intrigue, and the murmurs surrounding me never ceased. From childhood, I had been groomed to master music, calligraphy, painting, and etiquette, one of the most prominent young ladies of the Carter family among New York high society. At 18, I attended the prestigious debutante ball at the Waldorf, then went on to earn my business degree from one of the world's top universities. Yet no calculation could have prepared me for what followed. While my grandmother lay gravely ill, my father's gambling spiraled until he was swindled out of every asset, even putting my younger brother Eddie in the line of fire, kidnapped and shot, losing his leg. Before graduation, I had become the fallen heiress whispered about in every drawing room, rushing home just to see my grandmother one last time. She was a woman of distinguished lineage who had shouldered the family fortune after my grandfather's early death. Even in her final days, she kept her hair in a neat chignon and wore her kippah with poise, holding on to every shred of dignity. Her thin, withered hands gripped mine, her cloudy eyes unwavering. Victoria, remember, beauty with the right cards in hand is a trump card. Beauty alone is a dead hand. I leave the Carter family and Eddie to you. You must carry this responsibility. To salvage our position, I turned marriage into my final gamble, my decisive card. Families who once courted alliances now either schemed against me, waited for my fall, or kicked me while I was down. Only Alexander, who had pursued me for years, refused to leave my side, insisting on marrying me. He endured 30 lashes of his family's discipline before he was allowed to bring me through their gates. I repaid what I owed. When my father-in-law, Richard Whitmore Sr., was diagnosed with cancer, I devoted myself entirely to managing the Whitmore empire, expanding its reach and multiplying its wealth many times over. Yet the bitter truth was that while I poured every ounce of myself into creating prosperity for his family, Alexander was busy pouring his affections into someone else. His love had always burned with an intense, almost reckless heat. When he loved, he seemed willing to give his life. When that love died, he could find 1,000 reasons to discard you, like something cheap and outdated. I was in the middle of an animated conversation with a powerful business magnate when the doors to the ballroom swung open. Chloe Monroe swept in her arm, looped possessively through Alexander's, wearing a couture evening gown, that radiated elegance and calculated charm. I knew that gown. It was the one I had commissioned in Paris 6 months earlier, a custom design worth well into 7 figures. Chloe's smile was all sunshine and innocence, like a shadow of who I used to be before my world became barbed and cold. The moment she sensed eyes upon her, she played her part perfectly, feigning shy surprise, curling closer into Alexander's side, clutching his arm as though she might vanish without his protection. "I'm a little nervous," she murmured sweetly. Alexander, utterly unashamed, reached out to pinch her nose in a playful, intimate gesture. "You said you wanted to be a power player to see what it's like to run the world. That's why I brought you here." Chloe pouted adorably, tugged his hand down, and whispered, "Stop teasing me. People are looking. It's embarrassing." I swirled the wine in my glass with quiet composure, letting the hushed conversations drift into my ears. "The Whitmore heir is truly blessed," one voice murmured, "a wife who can run the business, and a mistress sweet enough to keep him entertained." Another voice followed, lower, but laced with mockery, recalling how I used to lash out at anyone who insulted my younger brother Eddie, even when my family teetered on the edge of ruin. But times change. Without the Whitmore fortune as her shelter, her brother wouldn't have lasted long. Richard Whitmore Sr. is no fool. If a daughter-in-law isn't an asset, she wouldn't be allowed to expand the empire. I drained my glass in one swallow and walked toward them. Chloe's eyes flickered as she caught sight of the deep emerald necklace at my throat, but Alexander kept his arm locked around her. "Don't worry," he murmured to her. "As long as I'm here, no one will touch you." For a split second I froze, because there was a time he had said those exact words to me. Years ago, no matter where I went, he followed. He once flew me all the way to Finland to see the northern lights, only to end up with pneumonia that nearly claimed his life. Somewhere along the way, that devotion began to fade. Maybe it started when I risked my life to give birth to a son with a congenital heart defect. My energy, my time, my heart all went into caring for Ben, leaving little for him. Or maybe it began when the Whitmores came under attack, when his father landed in the hospital, and I had to shoulder the burden of protecting our son and the business. The Alexander who once worshipped the idea of love began to resent the woman who acted more like a CEO than the gentle wife he wanted, stripping away his sense of ease. And then came Chloe Monroe, a woman who reminded him just enough of me but with the softness of a caged canary. With her, he found the illusion of pure, uncomplicated romance I could no longer provide. They played their little games. She ran, he chased, standing in line for hours to buy street food, as if that somehow proved their connection. I used to lie awake wondering how it had all unraveled. It was Mrs. Chu, the daughter-in-law of my late grandmother's closest friend, who helped me see the truth. Some people grow tired of being the one who chases. The moment they find someone willing to be chased, they lose all sense of reason, acting with the reckless hunger of someone who just discovered they can win. It was almost laughable. The steadfast love I once believed was eternal turned out to be nothing more than a man's need to conquer and claim to have what he believed was rightfully his. I had no interest in Alexander's petty schemes or his desperate need to parade Chloe Monroe around like a prize. He could flaunt her all he wanted. It meant nothing to me. Tonight's gala was hosted by Donovan Sterling, a Chinese-American financial powerhouse planning a massive investment in New York. My sources told me he and his wife shared a deep, loyal bond, and that they despised people lacking integrity. If not for the importance of this deal, I would never have wasted money silencing the gossip online. Alexander might have no shame, but my career was something I guarded fiercely. He, however, seemed determined to test me, striding past with Chloe on his arm, leading her straight to Jonathan as if to prove she could secure a billion-dollar contract without me. I watched detached as Chloe stumbled through broken English, awkwardly introducing herself as Alexander's chief secretary. I could barely suppress a laugh. A year ago, during her interview, she had spilled coffee all over him and blushed furiously. Despite my objections, he had insisted on hiring her, a graduate from a third-rate school who couldn't handle a glass of wine at a networking event without him stepping in. She had once made a blunder that cost the Whitmore Group dearly. To placate his father's fury, Alexander had sacrificed my assistant Samantha Turner, a top Ivy League graduate fluent in 5 languages, forcing her to take the fall. I shouldered the fallout to protect Sam, but after that incident, I began to seriously question the point of holding on to this marriage. Real life is not a fairy tale. The CEO and his sweet young secretary could not impress Jonathan Sterling. When the rejection came, Alexander froze, the tension around him palpable. I sipped my wine and struck up a smooth conversation with Mrs. Sterling in flawless German, exchanging contact details with ease. Chloe's eyes burned with jealousy and resentment, while Alexander's gaze lingered on me for a long moment, silent but heavy. When Chloe realized she had lost face, she stormed off, clutching her limited edition Hermes bag, and Alexander didn't spare me a glance before hurrying after her. Back at the Malibu estate, the weight in my chest still hadn't lifted. Alexander returned with Ben, who had been staying with him. After 2 weeks apart, my son looked at me with an unfamiliar coldness. "Mom, all you do is work. You don't care about me. If it weren't for Auntie Chloe playing games with me and taking me to the aquarium, I'd be bored to death at home. You're just mean to her. You're not nice at all." His defiance caught me off guard. Alexander had been busy enjoying himself, paying little attention to his son, while I juggled business like a spinning top. Even when guilt gnawed at me, the best I could do was entrust him to early skills classes. But behind my back, Alexander had allowed Chloe to get close to Ben, filling his head with comparisons. "Auntie Chloe is nothing like you," he said. "She's always there celebrating holidays with me. Holidays. Even Qingming, even Ghost Festival. What did a child in America know about those?" Chloe was far more experienced at skipping responsibilities, teaching my son how to provoke 3 different teachers in a row, all under the guise of giving him a happy childhood. I only learned the truth by accident yesterday. Ben had fallen from a horse and refused to continue riding lessons. It wasn't until the trainer discovered a small cut on the animal's back that anyone realized it had been done intentionally. Chloe had given my son a pocket knife and taught him to injure the horse so he'd have an excuse to quit. I rubbed my sore feet after a day in heels fighting to stay calm. "Ben, your grandfather's health is getting worse. Someone has to step up and take responsibility. Don't make excuses. You need to learn finance, writing, and languages." "You're a failure, Mom," he shot back. "You're nothing compared to Auntie Chloe. If she were my mom, everything would be better." No matter how composed I was, that sentence stole the air from my lungs. I stood ready to discipline him, but before I could, a figure burst into the room. Chloe, in all her beauty, shoved me hard. I stumbled crashing to the floor and dragging a priceless antique vase down with me. Blood dripped steadily from the palm of my hand as she stepped in front of Ben like a protective mother, her voice sharp with accusation. "I won't let you hurt him." In that moment, she cast me as the wicked stepmother in my own home, while my husband's son stood behind her, glaring at me as if I were the enemy. They stood there, father and son, flanking Chloe Monroe, as if they had rehearsed the scene, united against me. I gripped my phone in my uninjured hand, intending to call the police, but Alexander snatched it away. His face twisted with anger. "Victoria, are you out of your mind? If you call the cops, every tabloid in the city will plaster the Whitmore name across the front page as the center of a scandal." Ben jumped in to defend her, his voice shrill with righteous indignation. "If you try to take Auntie Chloe away, I'll never call you Mom again." They hurled their accusations with the air of moral authority, neither noticing nor caring that my hand was trembling, blood dripping steadily onto the floor. In that moment, exhaustion seeped into my bones. Before Ben turned 3, I had been the one to care for him, cooking his meals from scratch, telling him bedtime stories every night. Even after he started preschool, I carved out time, no matter how busy, to practice English with him. Everyone said children had to win from the starting line, and as the son of an elite family, he would face fierce competition his entire life. One lapse, one bit of carelessness, and he could tumble down the ladder. Yet all he wanted was to skip classes with Chloe, playing games, and eating junk that rotted both mind and body. Perhaps I thought bitterly mediocrity really could be inherited. I sat down, pulling open a drawer to find bandages for my hand. Alexander's voice softened as he stepped closer, trying to take my arm. "If you just admit you fell on your own and that Chloe had nothing to do with it, I'll call the family doctor to take care of you." I yanked my arm away. "Don't threaten me." When the Carter family was on the brink of collapse and debt collectors were banging on our door, I wasn't afraid. "You think I'm afraid now?" He didn't know that, after watching one teacher after another quit in frustration, I had installed a surveillance system in the house connected directly to my office computer. I had already messaged Samantha to call the police. Chloe Monroe had intentionally hurt me, and I would see her in a cell. Alexander's face turned ashen with rage. His father despised any invasion of privacy and had forbidden security cameras in the Whitmore estate, but now Richard Whitmore Sr. was in a care facility and would likely never return. Chloe was led away by the police. I refused to relent, insisting she had deliberately destroyed property and injured me. The footage clearly showed her pushing me toward the antique vase. Alexander, ever gallant in his own twisted way, refused to demand compensation. A $20 million vase meant nothing to him, apparently. If his father knew how recklessly he squandered wealth, it might be enough to send the old man into another medical crisis. Alexander turned on me, his tone sharp. "Victoria, my father just finished chemotherapy. Don't use this nonsense to upset him." I let out a short, cold laugh. He had spent his entire life under the shadow of a domineering father, playing the role of obedient son. Marrying me had likely been the only act of rebellion he'd ever dared. Once his father was hospitalized, he began living exactly as he pleased, throwing money at yachts for Chloe, chasing her across airports, in a Rolls-Royce, staging over-the-top public dramas fit for a Hollywood script. It was nothing more than the release of a man long repressed, now intoxicated by his own impulses. To focus on my work, I moved into a 7-star hotel near the company headquarters. Alexander would not leave me in peace, calling daily to demand I reconcile with Chloe. I had no time for his games. Jonathan Sterling wouldn't be in New York for long, and opportunities like this demanded every ounce of attention. When I presented Mrs. Sterling with a rare painting she had sought for years, I secured an invitation to the exclusive investment dinner. One more step and I would have everything I'd worked for. Then came the summons from Richard Whitmore Sr. After rounds of chemotherapy, the once formidable patriarch was bald, gaunt, and aged beyond his years. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Victoria, you've worked hard managing the Whitmore Group all these years, and the Carters have not gone without benefit. I was the one who drove away the thugs who would have taken your father's arm, the one who kept your brother alive, the one who saved the Carter holdings from collapse." His words were a mix of warning and reminder, delivered with the same deliberate weight as every move he had ever made. A person should know the meaning of gratitude. Richard Whitmore Sr. His tone was equal parts warning and reminder, his usual tactic. Back then, I married Alexander Alex Whitmore because of the Whitmore family's powerful influence, a dynasty with deep ties in both the legitimate business world and the underworld. I have to admit, without a man as ruthless and shrewd as Richard Sr., my father's Hale family might have been completely destroyed by his enemies. 3 years ago, when Richard Sr. was diagnosed with cancer, he had intended to hand over control of the company to his son. Unfortunately, Alex had no talent for business. After several devastating losses, Richard reluctantly allowed me to take part in the company's decision-making. Even so, the family patriarch never did anything the simple way. He hired an entire team of top-tier lawyers to force me into signing a stack of restrictive contracts. I could make decisions, yes, but I couldn't touch the company's core profits. Only after proving my abilities over and over did he agree to pay me an annual salary of $10 million. To put it bluntly, I was nothing more than a well-paid daughter-in-law working for the Whitmore family. Richard Sr. believed that, for the sake of my husband and son, I would never do anything to harm the company. Men are always so sure of themselves. They forget one thing: women are only willing to sacrifice when they still have a faithful husband and a son who doesn't betray them. Once that's gone, she'll carve out a new path for herself, even if it's soaked in blood. As I peeled an apple, I listened to Richard Sr.'s lecture. "Alex has been a little reckless lately, but the Whitmore family recognizes you as our daughter-in-law. Others will never take your place." I laughed coldly inside. Alex and Chloe Monroe had been sneaking around for over a year. And she wasn't the first. The first time I found out was 3 years ago. I had demanded a divorce, but my kind-hearted father-in-law immediately brought out a prenuptial agreement, speaking half in persuasion, half in threat. "You can leave, but Benjamin is a Whitmore. You can't take him with you. Your father's hand is crippled, your family business is weak, and your younger brother Edward isn't ready to take over. If you go against us, the Hale family will get nothing." At the time, I had just started working at Whitmore Enterprises. I didn't yet have the power to fight back. My fear of total ruin outweighed my pride, so I stayed. Under Richard Sr.'s watchful eye, I expanded the Whitmore business. He was very pleased. "One day this will all go to Benjamin. A sturdy tree gives shade, and the next generation will enjoy the fruit. You and I are the same kind of people. Don't be like your mother-in-law, short-sighted and incapable." Alex's mother was just a socialite who spent her days shopping. She always saw me as a threat, convinced I was stealing her place in the family by working closely with Richard Sr. He had married her because she was obedient and would never interfere in his work. Looking back, maybe he regretted having a son who lacked ambition. Richard Sr. valued me, but he was also wary. Victoria Alex is still young. He doesn't understand the importance of a true partner. When life gets hard, it's better to have someone to share the burden. The Whitmores and the Hales have always been like lips and teeth. If our family stays strong, no one will dare touch yours. Don't worry, I'll see to it that everything is handled. As long as Benjamin is here, our marriage alliance will never break. The old fox had called me in to both remind and warn me. I brought Alex along to meet Jonathan Sterling. Alex came reluctantly complaining that I hadn't signed the settlement papers, which meant Chloe had to spend a few days in jail before he bailed her out. It was just a minor offense. Was it really worth making such a big deal? Remember when you broke your arm racing? I didn't make a fuss. Right then his phone rang, a childish song. The big elephant will dance, the little monkey will climb came through. It was Alex's voice singing, recorded by Benjamin and Chloe. His face flushed, then turned pale. I didn't bother to respond, only urging him not to flaunt the so-called harmony between the three of them in front of me. Mr. Sterling hated people who showed up late, and Alex should know exactly what he should and shouldn't say. But the moment he picked up the call, Chloe's sobbing came through the line, dripping with manipulation. Are you secretly seeing that old hag? I'm barely holding myself together after what you did to me, and you go running off with someone else right behind my back. I don't care. If you're not here within an hour, I'm booking the next flight out. Her whiny tone was laced with the background noise of video games, and then Ben's excited voice broke in. Dad, hurry up. Auntie Chloe's eyes are all swollen like peaches. I'm coming, Alex replied instantly. I smirked, a flicker of cold amusement crossing my gaze as I looked at him. $1 billion contract for the Whitmore family. And you think you can just refuse to sign Alex with me here? Do you really believe I would let our son's future slip away? He was arrogant, smug, certain that for Ben's sake, I'd work myself to the bone for the Whitmores until the day I died. Without another word, he turned and bolted. From a distance, the men Richard Whitmore Sr. had assigned to watch me didn't notice the slight curl at the corner of my lips as I lowered my gaze. I stepped into the private VIP room. The guests were few, each one vetted thoroughly for their background and capabilities. Jonathan Sterling was engaged in an animated conversation with another man. I checked my attire, then made my way over at a measured pace. Jonathan greeted me warmly. Victoria, my wife, is still raving about the painting you gave her. Come, let me introduce you to my most important partner, Christopher Donovan. I stopped short. The man standing before me was someone I hadn't seen in 18 years. We had known each other since preschool. He'd been a rebellious boy, quick with his fists, obsessed with racing and horseback riding, hot-tempered, and I had been the only one who could rein him in. It was a cruel twist of fate that the year my family teetered on the brink of ruin, Chris was provoked into a race. I'd tried desperately to stop him, but he refused to back down. In the end, he pulled me with him, sending both of us and his bike crashing down. I had no idea how long we were unconscious. When I woke up, my world had collapsed. My father had been lured out to sea, and my younger brother Eddie had been kidnapped. Regret gnawed at me. If I had returned to New York earlier that winter, maybe I could have stopped my father from making that fatal mistake. Maybe I could have saved Eddie's leg. Chris had waited outside my door for hours, battered and soaked, looking like a stray dog left out in the rain. But I never opened the door. Soon after, he left for North America, vanishing without a trace. Not even when I announced my marriage did he appear. The man before me now was nothing like the reckless boy I had known. His once wild energy now encased in an icy composure that kept people at a distance. Seeing him again, I quickly smothered the emotions stirring in my chest and smiled politely as though we were strangers. Hello, Chris. It's been a long time. His voice seemed to echo from somewhere far away. Victoria, how have you been all these years? You've never spoken to me with such formality before. My smile faltered for the briefest moment. Old memories have a way of flooding back when you meet someone from your past, but I wasn't the same girl anymore. Time had passed, and I knew now that my anger at him back then had been misplaced. I had chosen to stop him from racing, confident I could change his mind. Blaming him was pointless. It had all started with my own stubborn belief that I could tame a wild horse. Chris, perceptive as ever, caught my expression and spoke first. If it weren't for you, I would have been going faster that day, and I might not have survived. If you want that contract with Jonathan, I can help. He was still the same, confident, steady, and unflinching. I couldn't help but let out a sharp, mocking laugh. President Donovan, you must be joking. I'm nothing to you. What right would I have to control your thoughts? It was the exact same line he had once used to provoke me into leaving the racing track. What happened back then was my fault. I was a reckless kid who wouldn't listen to you. And that's why things ended the way they did. You're still mad at me, aren't you? I'm not mad at anyone. I lied easily. The truth was, I hadn't forgiven him, and I hadn't forgiven myself either. That's why I had lowered myself to marry into the Whitmore family, a nest of schemers. Christopher. Chris Donovan's voice suddenly turned sharp. Shut up. I lowered my tone, took a deep breath, and glanced at him warily. Things aren't what you think. If you really want what's best for me, then don't do anything at all. Fine. From now on, no matter what you say, I'll listen. I slipped into the restroom to collect myself. When I stepped back out, I nearly collided with a charming young boy whose face bore an uncanny resemblance to Chris, at least 70 or 80%. You're Ms. Hale, right? Don't get the wrong idea. Uncle Chris isn't my dad, he's my uncle. It hit me. Chris had an older brother who had gone to North America years ago and no one had heard from him since. Kid, are you lost? No, ma'am. My name's Mason Donovan. I'm here just to meet you. The boy tried to pull me toward the balcony to talk. I was about to refuse when Mason pulled out a small worn amulet. My eyes widened in shock. It was the very same amulet I had prayed for at a temple when my younger brother, Edward Eddie Hale, had been kidnapped, and his life was in danger. How did you get this? Come with me and I'll tell you. Mason was only 2 years older than Benjamin Ben Whitmore, but his quick wit was 10 times sharper. He knew exactly how to bait someone into his trap. We sat on a swing at the top floor looking out over the dazzling skyline. His voice was still soft with youth, but every word was clear. He told me a heartbreaking story. After my family's downfall, Chris, desperate to make amends, had traveled across the ocean to North America, battered and injured, to beg his older brother for help. His brother, unable to watch him drown in guilt, agreed to bring the whole family back to the States. But a sudden snowstorm blocked their way. To protect Chris, who was sitting in the passenger seat, and the family in the back, his brother swerved to avoid a collision. Chris's sister-in-law shielded her young son with her own body, taking the full force of the crash. Chris was badly injured again this time, suffering a head trauma that left him in a coma. Thankfully, the Donovans were powerful enough in their area to ensure Mason was raised by a loyal family butler until he turned 13. Only then did Chris finally wake up. It was like waking from a years-long dream. When he opened his eyes, the people he loved most were gone. His chest ached until Mason slipped a few candies into his hand, those tiny fingers clinging to him, his little voice calling Uncle, Uncle over and over. Chris vowed that he wouldn't let his brother's sacrifice go to waste. With his natural business acumen, it took him only a few years to build an empire and dominate the North American market. Even so, he lived in near-complete seclusion, avoiding parties and public events. Mason's voice carried a mix of childishness and irritation. My uncle's such a coward. He's scared of running into old acquaintances, scared of hearing you got married, scared you'll hate him. Then he added, but the person who helped your brother walk again was my uncle's lead physician. I froze. Years ago, I had taken Eddie to every top doctor I could find, but no one could help. Seeing him bound to a wheelchair, I thought he would never walk again. Then one day, I received an email from the world's top orthopedic hospital, and I took him to North America for treatment. Now he can walk with a prosthetic leg. My uncle told your brother not to tell you. He didn't want you thinking he was just trying to make amends, Mason said. Eddie had always been frail and gentle, remembering the times he had wanted to tell me something, but swallowed the words instead. I was stunned by how he had managed to hide such a thing from me all this time. Mason's eyes blinked slowly, studying my reaction. A year ago, my nephew told me he had heard about what my husband had done and was planning to return to New York. But fate had other plans. Mason Donovan was diagnosed with leukemia, forcing Christopher Chris Donovan to put everything on hold. The boy rolled up his sleeve, revealing a lattice of needle marks that stabbed straight into my heart. A lump rose in my throat, and I couldn't stop myself from pulling him into my arms. But Mason, wise beyond his years, patted my back and whispered, "Don't cry, Aunt Victoria. Your son Ben and I are already good friends." He even gave me the amulet you once prayed over, saying it would help me overcome bad luck and live a healthy life. His words made my chest tighten. I had failed to secure Jonathan Sterling's investment for the Whitmore family, and the fallout was immediate. Richard Whitmore Sr. exploded in fury, hurling a glass to the floor near my feet. Useless. What good are you to this family? His voice was full of contempt, treating me like nothing more than a beast of burden for the Whitmore empire. I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly took out tabloid magazines plastered with photos of Alexander Alex Whitmore and Chloe Monroe fleeing together, placing them neatly on his hospital bed. His face hardened, but I pressed on, detailing the sordid, reckless things his son had done, the very things he had tried to keep hidden from his father. "Call him back here right now," Richard demanded, his voice rising until he coughed up blood. Unfortunately for him, Alex's phone was off. "Victoria," he rasped. "Alex is a grown man. You can't control him. But your son is only 6. Why can't you discipline him so he doesn't skip school to run after adults and stir up trouble?" I only shrugged. "There's nothing I can do. Ben is every inch a Whitmore. He listens only to you and Alex. No matter what I say, the moment someone whispers in his ear, he turns his back on me without a second thought." Richard's jaw tightened, his voice shaking with rage. "Victoria Hale, how dare you speak to me like this?" "Don't be so angry," I said evenly. 2 years ago, I found evidence that proves you had a hand in luring my father into international waters that year." His eyes narrowed, his expression stone cold. "You're speaking nonsense." I gave a bitter laugh. "You've always been ambitious, always targeting families weaker than yours. You exploited my father's trust and naivety, stripping him of everything. Even my brother Eddie's kidnapping was part of your plan to throw my family into chaos and remove its pillar." He said nothing, though the flicker in his eyes told me he remembered every detail. "You didn't expect Alex to cling to me so tightly afterward," I continued. "You were certain you'd erased every trace of your crimes. You brought me into this house to control me, never thinking I could cause you trouble. Well, you're wrong. I've already sent the evidence to the police." "A life full of schemes only shortens it, Richard. The day of your downfall is coming, and you'll take your reputation to the grave with you." His clouded eyes bulged like an old bronze bell about to crack. 10 days later, Alex finally turned his phone back on. When he learned what I had done, exposing Whitmore Group's tax evasion, illegal competition, and even revealing that his father was the man who destroyed my family, he was livid. Fresh off the plane, he called me immediately. "Victoria Hale, if you're angry, take it out on me, but my father just finished chemotherapy. He can't handle another shock." I didn't hesitate. The devoted son suddenly remembers to defend his father. Funny, when he needed you most, you were too busy pampering your little canary. I sent Richard every last photo Chloe Monroe had smugly passed around, making sure they cut deep. He was so enraged I thought he might not survive the night. By then, the scandal was front-page news across the city. That was when I officially filed for divorce. Alex's eyes burned with fury. "Victoria, were you ever truly in love with me? If not, how could you drag the Whitmore family, who sheltered you for 7 years, through the mud like this?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "When you asked me to sign that prenuptial agreement, I didn't think twice. Because at that time, you risked your life to save my brother, helping my family avoid total ruin. But that was before I learned the truth that the man who saved us was also the man who destroyed us first. The heart is a fragile thing. Chris Donovan had stepped into my life when I was at my weakest, breaking through every wall I'd built around myself, becoming the one person I thought I could lean on. I once dreamed of building a happy life with him, marriage, children, a shared future we could both be proud of. But when I learned that Alexander Alex Whitmore's actions toward me were nothing more than an attempt to ease his own guilt, the truth hit like a blade to the chest. He had known exactly what his father had done to my family and did nothing to stop it. Worse, he'd wanted to claim me when I was already surrounded by ruin. Alex's eyes turned bloodshot, his voice rising in anger. "Victoria, my father was wrong, but your father's own foolishness and naivety are what doomed the Hale family. Business is war. If it hadn't been the Whitmores, it would have been the Chens or the Lees who crushed your family's patriarch." I remembered my grandmother's desperate face before she passed, and my younger brother Eddie confined to a wheelchair, unable to run across a field like he used to. My chest tightened with grief. Without thinking, I slapped him hard. "Don't dress up your family's cowardice as some noble business strategy. If you've accepted playing dirty, don't blame me for stepping on the Whitmores to climb higher. What are you planning?" His tone shifted, almost pleading. "Don't be reckless. Ben is part of both the Whitmore and Hale families. If the Whitmores collapse, it won't be good for him either, but it will be good for me. With the scandals breaking wide open, Whitmore's stock had tanked. Longtime partners and potential clients were bailing one after another. I'd been preparing for this for years, quietly steering them toward the new company under my brother Edward Eddie Hale's name, securing even Jonathan Sterling's contracts. The headlines about the Hale family's sudden rise dominated the business pages in New York, though not everyone cared about financial news. Richard Whitmore Sr. had been released temporarily for medical treatment, and his clueless wife did nothing but cry. Alex scrambled to hold on to old clients while Ben and Chloe Monroe seemed perfectly content living their best lives. Ben took a break from school, wasting time in pure indulgence, while Chloe, now pregnant, was determined to cement her place as the next Mrs. Whitmore. My useless son even called me on video to brag. Chloe looked at me with a smug smile. I'm pregnant. Alex proposed to me overseas. Isn't this ring beautiful? It's gorgeous, I said flatly. The perfect accessory for someone missing part of her brain. Her smile faltered, color draining from her face. Ben quickly snatched the phone. Aunt Chloe's having a baby. I'm going to be a big brother now, and I won't have to call you Mom anymore. Hopeless. Absolutely hopeless. I was about to hang up when Mason Donovan, who'd been with me, recently spoke up from beside me. Wow, Aunt Victoria. How can a kid be that stupid? Doesn't he know that with a stepmother comes a stepfather, and eventually, all the inheritance will go to the child his dad loves most? 14 years old with an IQ of 140. Mason's logic was sharp enough to cut glass. Ben's face turned crimson. Who the hell are you? My mom hates it when anyone uses her phone. She doesn't even let me. Mason didn't flinch. I'm your mom's good kid, the one who's respectful, loyal, and especially hates ungrateful brats. I know exactly how hard she's worked to raise you, cooking every meal, scraping by to give you a decent life. And all it took was a few whispered lies for you to turn your back on her. Ben's anger boiled over. He grabbed a glass and hurled it against the wall, making Chloe shriek in fear. I couldn't resist one more jab. Careful. If you hurt your baby brother, your father might just kill you. I don't know if it was our words or something else, but later that night, Alex called. Your son just killed someone, he said grimly. By the time I reached the hospital, the truth had unraveled. Ben had asked Chloe, if you have a son, will I still be your number one? Whether it was maternal instinct or hormones. Chloe had put her hand over her belly and answered coldly. Ben Whitmore, I've tolerated you long enough. Your mother abandoned you and left the Whitmore family in ruins, forcing your father to clean up the mess. Don't think for 1 second you'll inherit a dime. If you want to stay here, you'll obey me, and one day you'll serve your baby brother. Adults can change their attitudes in an instant, but children rarely keep up. The moment Chloe Monroe turned to go down the stairs, Ben shoved her hard. At just 6 years old, years of junk food had made him nearly 110 pounds, enough to make that push brutal. Chloe tumbled to the bottom of the staircase, blood pooling around her. Not only did she lose the baby, but the injury ensured she could never have children again. Alexander Alex Whitmore now had his hands full, caring for a dying father, consoling a mother who never stopped crying, and keeping Chloe from attempting suicide. With no other choice, he dumped Ben back at my doorstep. You didn't raise him properly. That's why he's so out of control, he accused. I didn't hesitate. My hand cracked across his face. He was perfectly fine until he was 3. Then your father ordered me to run the company, and I balanced work with raising him, only to be met with constant criticism from your family. You knew Chloe was egging him on to do wrong, but you kept saying he was just a kid who would grow out of it. You let him spiral, and then blame me. You must be blind. Alex, unable to stand, the verbal blows stormed out. Ironically, even after nearly killing Chloe, Ben sat calmly playing on the tablet she'd given him, as if nothing had happened. I sighed. No matter how ungrateful he was still the greatest victim of this twisted marriage. But forgiveness was out of the question. I remembered being 6 years old myself, sitting beside my grandmother during board meetings, watching her stare down debt collectors. I had promised myself then that I would one day protect the Hale family empire. By that age, a child can see the shape of their own future. Yet Ben, at the same age, had been so easily manipulated that he turned his back on his own mother. My decision was final. I would send him to boarding school in England, giving him only enough allowance to survive. He hated sharing a dorm room, hated eating potatoes and fried fish every day, hated the strict bedtime. Soon he was calling home just to scream insults at me. "You're a disgusting woman, a coward. You killed my grandfather, bankrupted my father's company. I hope you die a horrible death. If I'm ever reborn, I'll make sure you're never my mother." 6 years of careful parenting erased in a heartbeat. The worst pain is when your heart has already gone numb. I felt nothing, only coldness. "Ben, there's nothing left between us. If you don't want to call me Mom, then wait until you're 18. 6 years later, he got into a fight at school, trying to push a classmate out of a 5th-floor window. In the chaos, he slipped. His head struck a boulder on the lawn below, killing him instantly. When the call came, hot tears slid down my face. Whatever had happened, he was still the child I had risked my life to bring into the world. There was a sharp, fleeting ache in my chest. Mason Donovan, sitting nearby, watching the financial news, quietly stepped over and handed me a tissue. "Aunt Victoria, meeting someone in life is fate. You can be sad, but don't stay sad for too long. People who care about you will hurt with you." I looked at this boy in front of me, an orphan since birth, living with constant illness, and my heart softened. I pulled him into an embrace. From the doorway came the sound of a light cough. Chris Donovan appeared. His face set in seriousness, but when our eyes met, his voice gentled. "Do you need a shoulder?" I looked at him in silence. Like a child caught saying something foolish, he quickly corrected himself. I meant Mason's shoulder. Since running into each other at Jonathan Sterling's party, Chris had quietly helped me secure a $1 billion contract, taken care of the follow-up negotiations, and smoothed out problems for my brother Eddie. But I had kept my distance, my tone toward him always cool. The sea of business was never still, and the tides of human emotions surged just as violently, leaving people exhausted. Chris Donovan seemed to sense my thoughts. He said nothing, just stayed quietly by my side. "You still resent me, don't you?" he finally asked. "How could I?" I replied evenly. "If it weren't for you tracking down the witness who fled to Southeast Asia, I never would have been able to bring down Richard Whitmore Sr., the man who orchestrated everything. Then why, after more than 6 months since your divorce, won't you agree to come back to me?" Chris stood there in a perfectly tailored black suit, his face calm, but his brow faintly furrowed. His eyes searched mine, waiting for an answer. Before I could speak, Mason Donovan returned from outside carrying a bowl of millet and red bean porridge. "Come on, Uncle," Mason teased with a smirk. "Victoria's enemies are still very much alive. She's busy building her empire. You think she has time to let you meddle?" Relief flickered across Chris's face. "Good. Then no matter how long it takes, I'll wait for the day you change your mind." Later, I carried the news of Benjamin Whitmore's death into the special care ward. Alex Whitmore sat between 2 hospital beds, gaunt and hollow-eyed, like a man whose world had crumbled. After the relentless pressure I'd put on the Whitmore family, Richard Sr. had avoided prison, only because terminal cancer had already spread through his body. But the agony of dying slowly was far worse than the sterility of a prison cell. My former mother-in-law had been abandoned by the high society ladies she once courted. She'd caused a scene outside their mansions, not noticing the sports car behind her, until it struck, leaving her with a traumatic brain injury. I heard it had been driven by some spoiled young heir, his new toy only days old. Alex looked at me in my designer dress, my polished poise radiating the authority of a woman who had fought and won. "You came to watch me fall, didn't you?" he rasped. "Yes," I said simply. Shock flickered in his eyes. "The Whitmore family is finished, billions in debt. The mansion seized, the company stripped bare. Things are far worse now than anything your family ever endured. Couldn't you, for old time's sake, help me once? God, I'd never known anyone could have skin thicker than the Great Wall. Alex, your father deliberately destroyed my family, just so you could play the hero. Not crushing you on the spot was already the height of mercy. Compared to that mistress of yours who ran off and left you with nothing, I didn't even demand a single asset when we divorced. That's generosity." And it was true, I hadn't taken a single piece of real estate from the Whitmores. What I took instead were their most profitable resources, their golden geese worth far more than bricks and land. Regret clouded Alex's face. "You must really hate Chloe Monroe. If I hadn't betrayed you for her, would we still be here?" "Oh, we would," I answered coldly. The son I raised was so easily turned into an ungrateful stranger by her whispers. He died far from home because of it. Between you, me, and her, this was a war long before it ended. A month later, Alex lost both his father and his mother. In a rage, he went looking for Chloe, spewing accusations that she'd poisoned his son against his own mother. Whatever pity I had left for the Whitmores vanished. Chloe Monroe was found stabbed to death in her luxury apartment, Alex's bloodied hands caught by the security guards who stormed in. Life in prison was inevitable, but for a pampered trust fund heir stripped of wealth, freedom, and luxury, who knew if he could survive 3 years, let alone 5. When the judge pronounced the sentence, I felt my shoulders loosen, like I'd finally woken from a long, dark dream. Stepping out of the courthouse, I saw my younger brother, Edward Eddie Hale, his prosthetic legs steady beneath him, waiting just beyond the steps. Beside him stood Mason, his closest friend, and Chris Donovan, holding a bouquet of champagne roses. I tightened my grip on the jade bracelet my grandmother had left me and smiled as I walked toward them. In that moment, everything good and bad was buried in the first half of my life. From here on, I would love and live only as I chose.